Hi, today we're going to be doing a demonstration on some configuration management automation tools. There's already a few tools that are out there on the market that are pretty popular today. Some of them are Ansible, CF Engine, Puppet, and Chef. However, today we're just going to be focusing on Chef. So this is our Chef server. So first, let me give you a quick overview of the architecture of Chef and how we're going to be using it today in this demo. So let's start off with cookbooks. Cookbooks is a container for recipes, so you can have multiple recipes for a cookbook. And a recipe pretty much is a set of instructions written in Ruby code that would execute on a particular node, which is a server, and would configure that node to your specifications. So currently right now we have some cookbooks that are in here. Our nodes, we don't have any nodes yet, and our nodes are our servers. So once we create some nodes, we would bootstrap them nodes and configure them to be able to talk to the Chef server, and those nodes would have a run list of cookbooks or recipes. So whenever a server or a node would detect that there is a change in a recipe, it will pull down that change in a recipe and execute it on the server. This is done by a configuration on a node where there's a Chef client process that runs as a daemon, and that would run in any particular interval that you would choose to configure. So the other aspect of the architecture is there's also a client. So the client being my machine, there is a knife command which you can use to communicate with the Chef server. So this right here up on the screen, this is the Vagrant Chef repository. So this is the repository that we will be using for the demo. And I just want to show you right here, if we go into the Chef directory, this is our Chef environment. So all of our cookbooks are in a cookbook directory. Environments, we have different environment files. So Chef also has the ability to manage multiple environments. An environment file, which is just a JSON file, would allow you to be able to substitute different variables for each environment. So let's say if we have a development environment and a QA environment, there are different connection strings for databases, different URLs for the sites that you want to host, different kernel parameters, any value that you can think of that you would need to parameterize, you can have different values in those environment files to be able to support multiple environments. Okay, so first let me talk about, before we get into the demo, let me talk about some highlights of using automation for your configuration management. The best part is you now have turned all of your environments into code, which enables you to apply version control. So at any point, if you want to revert back to a specific version, you now have that capability, and everything can be tracked and maintained. You can also look at it as you now have a living document as to how your environments are configured, and it will have a very high degree of accuracy. Since that code is executed against that environment, you know that all those configurations are current. If someone goes into a server and were to manually update something and not do it through a automated configuration management process, that value would be overwritten again by what is actually in the code, what is in your versioned repository. And that's due to a daemon that's running on that particular node at specific intervals. Some of the other highlights I would like to mention is you're able to apply mass changes with very low effort, which obviously translates into low cost. And you are also able to quickly reproduce your environments, and those environments would be identical, minus, or with the exception of the environment variables that will be different. But all of your configurations should be identical. Okay, so What we're going to do for this demo is we are going to bring up a virtual machine that will be running locally, and we are going to install Tomcat and just create a very simple Hello World application. So currently right now, I'm using Vagrant, which is a tool that works with VirtualBox. So just to show you our virtual machine, VirtualBox, we already have a machine that's up and running. This is the machine right here, but we're going to be using it through Vagrant, which is all command lined. And I don't really want to get too much into Vagrant or in this demo. We're just using Vagrant to execute Chef and to manage the virtual machine. And apparently this says that I'm in the wrong window. There we go. I just want to make sure that the machine is up and running for Vagrant. Okay, so we have a vanilla virtual machine. I already brought it up for time's sake. So it's currently running. We can SSH into this machine just by doing a Vagrant SSH. It's just one of the capabilities of Vagrant. So rather than typing in SSH, have a key and username and host. It just makes it a lot easier. So if we log in, it's a completely vanilla box. Let me go into root mode and just want to make sure. So we don't have Tomcat installed on here at all. And there is no Tomcat 6 directory. So it's good. So we can exit out of here. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a cookbook that will install Tomcat. Now, one of the best things, or one of the things to take into consideration, with using a tool like Chef or Puppet or a lot of these configuration management tools, if they're open source, you have libraries that are already out there in the community, cookbooks that are already out there in the community, and also tons of information if you're struggling with anything. Lots of information to look up. So one of the things, Tomcat is a pretty popular install on servers, so we can just search to see if there's already a cookbook for Tomcat. It looks like there is. So this is great. So we already have our Tomcat installation done for us. So what we can do is right now I'm in my Chef directory, and inside my Chef directory there's cookbooks directory. So underneath the Chef directory I can run a knife command, which is the client command utility that communicates with the Chef server. So if we show you the Chef server, we look at the cookbooks, we don't have a Tomcat cookbook that's already out here on the server. And I don't have one in a repository as well. So what we can do is we can run knife, cookbook, site, download, and then Tomcat. So this will automatically download it from the ops code store. So if I go into cookbooks, actually went in this directory. Okay. So I can do a tar -exf and the file. I'm going to put it in the cookbooks directory. There we go. Okay. Remove Tomcat. Let's see if it's there. We now have the Tomcat. So if we go in. So this is a Tomcat cookbook that we are now in. You can see there's a few directories. There's an attributes directory. Attributes would just contain all the default attributes of values that are in variables that are in the recipes where you can substitute any values with. So the attributes would just be the default values, and then you can override the values in an environment file or in a role. There's many levels of precedence order for variables, and that can be a very long discussion, so we can get into that in another time. So what we want to do now is we now have this Tomcat recipe. So what we want to do is we want to put this up on our chef server. So if I do knife cookbook, upload, and Tomcat. And this will upload the cookbook that's in my repository onto the chef server. So this is chef server, so if I refresh, I see I just added my Tomcat cookbook. Now if I want to run this cookbook on a server, all I have to do is just add this cookbook to that server's run list. So here, let me show you how I got into this. So we will be putting the Tomcat recipe, we'll be adding it to our server through Vagrant. And let me just change my syntax to Ruby. There we go, that's much better. So for time's sake, I've already created my Vagrant file. This is a file that I use to bring up a virtual machine. And the section I have commented out here, this is our chef configuration section. All this configuration stuff is mainly in our knife configuration file. Since we're not running Chef right now through the knife client and we're doing it through Vagrant, I had to create this information, this configuration in the Vagrant file so it knows how to communicate with Chef. Our Chef environment that I created is Chef. We have a Chef demo environment, and Hello World Chef demo is going to be the name of our node that will be created on the Chef server. So from here, all I have to do is just add a recipe. So add recipe, this is the run list. And we will show you what that looks like once we have a node created. I'm just going to save this right here. So at this point right now, if we were to run this, we would be able to, it would bootstrap the node and we would see that node on a Chef server. It would also go through all of our configuration and install Tomcat. So there's one more thing we want to do is we want to create another recipe that will install our Hello World application. So I'm back here. I'm going to clear my screen. So I'm back here in my cookbooks directory. So this is my chef environment. And if I just do a knife cookbook create, and I'm going to call it Hello World. Now this basically, running this command creates a template Hello World cookbook for us. So if I go in here, we'll see I have all the directories. I got the attributes directory, which has attributes file in it, definitions, files. If I want to put files out on a server, there's different libraries you have access to. You can create the libraries that you would have to create. Basically, in this demo, because there's lots to review, we're just going to be focusing on recipes. And we'll also look at the attributes, because we're going to be pulling some attributes from our Tomcat cookbook that we had downloaded from our open source repository. So we're going to start writing a recipe. So I'm going to go into the recipes directory, and there's a default RB file. Default, that's just when you add a cookbook to a run list, it's only going to run the default RB. You can have, as I said in the beginning, you have multiple recipes to a cookbook. Okay, so, basic concept right here is we're just going to create a Hello World application. So some of the configurations that I already know that I need to do on a server is I need to create a directory, and then I'm going to create a template of an index.html file that will default once we go to the URL. And then I also want to restart the Tomcat service after that index.html is dropped onto the server. So first thing, as I said, we're going to create a directory. And we're going to create a variable here, web app and we'll call it Tomcat, or hello world. Go. So we can do a string interpolation now on this variable to create this directory. Okay, there should be a parent directory that this needs to go in, so that would be our base web app directory. And we need to see how the Tomcat current cookbook is configuring this base web app directory. So I'm going to leave this cookbook and I'm going to go open up Tomcat and I'm going to open up the attributes and default RV file. So these are the attributes that it defaults to. I'm not overriding any of these yet. So I see right here, so we have a case statement, we're looking at the platform, CentOS is what we are running, so this variable right here, web app directory, we can just simply pull this and it will pull the value for us. Instead of default, I'm going to use node, because I'm not defaulting in an attribute file. So now, to create this directory, I would just add an additional variable into the string interpolation and call it the base web app directory. There we go. And our group is going to be Tomcat. So this right here should create that directory. Our next part that we want to do is we wanted to create a template. And this template is going to go in our base web app directory. Actually, we can just copy this right here, save some time. And it's going to call it index.html. And our source ERB file is going to be index.html. Now, all of our templates are ERB, have the extension ERB. And our owner is going to be Tomcat. And we're going to use some variables in here also. So we're going to, let's say, text. Equals, we can put in hello world. That will be our text that we want to print in the file. Save this so far. Now we're going to create that template. So if I go into our media, I can just touch a file inside our hello world application. Templates default, and we want to call it index.html.erb. Created that file, and I just want to open this file now. Okay, so this is just going to be a simple HTML document. Title and the head, create a body, and we want to put our text here. And since we want it to be text, and I'm going to end h1 time and our body, and then end HTML. See that? That was wrong. Okay, so everything looks okay in here. So that part right there should create the index.html file on a server. So the next part after that, we would, in order to display the page, we want to restart the service. So since we added in our Vagrant file, we added a Tomcat recipe, so there's a precedence order in how these recipes are ran. So Tomcat will run first. We still did not add our new Hello World cookbook to the run list yet. So we're going to call the service provider from Chef Tomcat. And I know by default it's version 6 is being installed. So that's actually the name of the service. So we're going to say that this supports restart. And then call this notifies restart service. And change this to cat 6. Save that. Support. So status is true and restart is true. So if the service is already started, this block is not going to run. If it's already enabled, this block is not going to run. If the service is off, this block will run. This template block is only going to run if the Chef server notices that there's a update inside this file, and then it will update that file on the node that has this cookbook on its run list, and then this notify statement will notify the service to restart. Okay, so it looks like we have everything here. So our next part is we can go back to our Vagrant file. So this is actually how we're going to be executing Chef. I want to add a new recipe and that's the Hello World. Save that. So from this point, I can go into my virtual environment and as we see, let me SSH back into this machine and just show you. So this is the local host. We call it our application Hello World. There's nothing there. There's no Tomcat directory. So Tomcat's not been installed. So let's execute our Chef scripts. Vagrant provision will re-provision this virtual machine. Now what this is going to do is this will install Chef client on this virtual machine and it will register it with the Chef server. So if I go back to the Chef server and I look here at nodes, there's no nodes. So right here, so it's reaching out to get chef.com and it's downloading Chef. It's now installing Chef. So when I say bootstrapping, basically what that's doing is registering this node to the Chef server, and it's also running through a process which is called OHI, which will grab all the system information and store it as system attributes on the Chef server. So that comes in handy because you can always run searches from your client across your entire infrastructure. So right now it's setting the run list. So it's running it set the run list to Tomcat and Hello World. And if I refresh this page, we should see our node appear. This is our node. If we click on our node, at the end of this, we will see our run list and attributes appear. The information has not uploaded to the Chef server yet, but we will see that after the end of this run. Okay, we do have an error because I did not upload the recipes, which we can resolve real quick. So that was failing because it wanted to run the Hello World recipe. So if I do my cookbook list, this will show me all the cookbooks that are currently on the chef server. We just created the Hello World, so Tomcat is up there, but we created the Hello World cookbook, but I didn't upload it to the server. So that's what caused that error. So book upload. So now that that's uploaded, we should be able to re-provision. As we see, it's also loading some other cookbooks, Java, OpenSSL, and that is because Hello World. There's also dependency cookbooks as well. So some of your cookbooks may depend on other cookbooks because it's using resources from them. Let's look at this variable here. And I did a silly mistake. It was a typo. And this needs an S for variables. So again, we can re-upload that cookbook. Re-provision. So we see that was a compile error. And there's an undefined method on variable. So that's how I knew it was incorrect. This would run a little bit faster in a bigger environment, but since I'm running a virtual machine locally, I have very little memory allocated to it. So this is installing Java. Part of this slowness is also due to my bandwidth currently. So now we are installing Tomcat. This one shouldn't take too long. Starting Tomcat service, and next we should be running into the Hello World recipe. Looks like it installed our Hello World application. Okay, our run is complete. Now, if everything went correctly, there we go. So we are now running a server with a simple Hello World application that is running Tomcat. So if you'd like to know a little bit more or view this demonstration for yourself, you can visit my repository. I have some instructions on here on how to run Vagrant, and I have the chef cookbooks that are required that I just did here. So we see that we have all these are community cookbooks with the exception of the Hello World. And the recipes, this is the file that we used right here. There's a little bit more parameterization in this one as well, but for time's sake of this demo, I didn't quite get into a lot of parameterization.